Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched The King. Let's talk about it. The King is directed by David Michôd or David Michôd, I'm not sure which one it is, but he also directed Animal Kingdom and Netflix's War Machine. Now this is also a Netflix film. I believe it will be coming to the platform on the 1st of November. I got a chance to see this film a little bit earlier because it premiered at the London Film Festival, which was pretty exciting because usually smaller films like this take ages to come to the UK unless of course they're on a streaming platform. So I was glad to catch it early, especially because I was already excited having seen the trailer. And I have to say that the film itself definitely delivers on what the trailer promised. So we're going to get into this review right now. There will be some spoilers at the end of the review, I think, because there are some twists and turns that I want to discuss, but for the most part I will keep it spoiler free. So we're going to dive into the good, we're going to dive into the bad. Without further ado, let's get into this review. So first up, I definitely think the best thing about this film is its lead, Timothée Chalamet, of course, as King Henry V. I think he did an excellent job capturing the turmoil and conflict within this character, especially when he ascends to the throne, succeeding his villainous father, played by Ben Mendelsohn, who's great as always as a villain. He does such a great job of assuming kingship and assuming the weight of responsibility that comes with it. And he also does a great job selling his friendship with Joel Edgerton's Falstaff. I think they have a great connection and chemistry together, and it works really well, especially in providing some moments of levity in an otherwise very serious and very somber film. The film itself doesn't really take a lot of time to fully establish the friendship and really explain how they came to be friends in the first place, but because of the actors' performances, it really is sold to us as a viewer because we definitely believe in their backstory, we believe in their connection and their camaraderie. And I think it was really important because this is the only significant relationship that we see King Henry engaging in. Speaking of relationships, the young prince definitely had a turbulent relationship with his father, King Henry IV, played by Ben Mendelsohn, like I said. Now, I thought that Ben Mendelsohn's performance as Henry's father was great, as per usual. They don't give him a ton to do, and he's not in the film, spoiler alert, for very long because, of course, Henry has to succeed to the throne. I think both actors did an excellent job successfully selling the ideological conflicts and differences between the two characters, especially during the deathbed scene where Hal visits his father in his very last moments and you see him looking down at the war-driven king with so much anger and resentfulness and hate, but also underneath all of that there seems to be some regret. And of course there is, because this is his father and he's facing him in his very last moments, and the two never had the relationship that Hal probably wanted them to have because of King Henry's ways and the way in which he led his people. Speaking of leadership, that's also another element of the film that I very much enjoyed. I liked seeing the different leadership styles of the two very different generations of kings, especially in the case of the medieval party politics or palace politics in this case that we experience here. And I can imagine that some people may not be a huge fan of that sort of thing. Like if your favorite parts of Game of Thrones are about the dragons, the magic, the mythological lore, then maybe this wouldn't be the type of film for you. But I actually really enjoyed the palace politics. I really enjoyed seeing how this character dealt with the deception and the distrust surrounding him, and ultimately the loneliness of taking on the role as king. I think it was only until he stepped into his father's shoes, or at least put on his father's crown, that he was able to fully appreciate the struggles that his father would have faced during his kingship. And going back to Game of Thrones, I will say that it was more than just the political intrigue that reminded me of the series. There are certain battle sequences and certain scenes that seem to be lifted directly out of Game of Thrones. Small spoiler here as well, but there is a battle sequence that takes place in France in a field that is very reminiscent of the Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones. They definitely use some of that cinematography, some of those action beats in order to convey the suffocation and the overwhelming sense of hopelessness of a battle. That this film does an excellent job of doing that. I definitely think it pays homage to the Battle of the Bastards in that way, but it still executes it so well because you feel helpless, you feel like you're being stomped all over. There is no glorious battle here. There's no real glory in war. I mean, that's definitely one of the messages of the film. That's definitely the rhetoric that King Henry V reiterates. But it is impeccably demonstrated during this battle sequence that, again, may have borrowed a few elements from Game of Thrones, but it does so well here, and it really does fit with the overall, again, message of this film, so it doesn't feel out of place in any way. And on top of that, I will say that I very much enjoyed the fact that King Henry got his hands dirty, both literally and figuratively, because he was in there with his soldiers. He was fighting on behalf of his country. He was getting down and dirty just like the rest of them. He wasn't a passive ruler. I really appreciated that about the film. Don't know if that's what the real King Henry V did, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but I will say that the film depicts a very strong leader that by the end of it, I was like, you know what? All hail King Henry V. It was a very convincing portrayal of this character. Now let's talk about some of the things that I didn't love quite as much about this film. First things first, the Dauphin is played by Robert Pattinson, and he definitely did that. I don't know what that was, but he did it. I don't know if it belonged in this film because it felt very different to what everyone else was doing, including Ben Mendelsohn, who's usually accused of, you know, hamming it up as a villain, but he was much more subdued. Robert Pattinson was having a blast being the bad guy, being the Dauphin, and it felt very tone deaf in comparison to everyone else who was very stoic, very serious, as I mentioned before. So I feel like if he had turned it down just a notch, it would have been perfect, especially because by the end of the film, from here on out there will be spoilers because I can't really discuss the rest of this film without them, so spoiler alert, but by the end of the film you do get introduced to the King of France, and he is very different in comparison to his son. Secondly, as much as I really enjoyed Timothée Chalamet's performance as Henry V, I wasn't such a huge fan of his performance as Prince Hal. I didn't really buy him as this world-weary, drunkard, playboy, bad boy prince. It wasn't really an archetype that fit him well. I think just aesthetically, like, he's very pretty and he's very lean. I think that archetype was a bit mismatched with the actor because he definitely shines in his portrayal as a stoic, quietly intelligent and calculating king. But at the beginning, it did take a while for me to warm up to him in this role because of how unconvincing he was as a drunkard who's seen war and seen the horrors of war, especially when he has that one-on-one battle with one of his father's enemies and he's trying to tell his brother not to go down this path, his father's path. It feels a bit odd because they look to be roughly the same age, but he's supposed to be acting like he's the older brother who has so much more world experience and experience in the battlefield. But I don't quite buy that just because of it's Timothée Chalamet. That was the only part where I thought his performance kind of fell short, but after that I was fully convinced of his portrayal as King Henry V. Although I will say I don't think that the transition from Prince Hal to King Henry V was gradual enough. I found it to be very sudden, very abrupt. It didn't quite demonstrate how a character who had been in that mental state for so long and had been so downtrodden and against the system would do so well, not only being a part of that system, but being the head of it. I also wasn't the biggest fan of Lily Rose Depp, who plays Princess Catherine. She is married off to King Henry at the end of the film, and that's pretty much the only time we really talk to her, we really see her, because she has this long kind of monologue about how Henry is really the bad guy because he's the one that started the war with France unprovoked. And that's of course when he realizes that he was tricked into going into war with France by Sean Harris's character. And of course this is a character that he trusted, especially after Joe Edgerton's Falstaff died. He realizes that his advisor wanted the war with France all along for his own personal gain. Now all of that was fine, except at the very end when he says that he's basically going to trust her for the rest of their married lives because she told him how it is. That to me was a bit of a stretch because they literally didn't know each other before that moment, and it was kind of out of nowhere that he was so I mean, did you not just learn your lesson? You can't trust anyone. You can't trust anyone. The only person that you could trust died on the battlefield, sadly. Don't go and trust the French king's daughter. Just, out of nowhere. Anyway, but overall, I have to say I had a really fun time with this one. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's very serious and stoic, but it's also a great character study and a great character development story. I liked the political intrigue. I liked the palace politics, like I said, and I very much enjoyed the medieval setting. Now, there is no way that this film is historically accurate. Of course it isn't. And it may not even be accurate to the Shakespearean plays that it is based off of. This was written by the director and Joel Edgerton, so they definitely could have taken a few liberties on that front. But I honestly don't mind, because the end product is something that I very much enjoyed. It's not revolutionary. It's not something that I've never seen before. And like I said, there are some elements of it that are borrowed from Game of Thrones, but for the most part I like Game of Thrones, and it makes sense that I like this film, so I'm going to give The King an 8 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys what my thoughts are on The King, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of the film down in the comments below. Perhaps wait until you get a chance to see the film, because most likely you haven't. But if you haven't, then let me know if you're looking forward to it, especially after my recommendation. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!